Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. It's really lovely to see you all here. It's a really nice turnout, so really pleased you could all make it. So I'm Managing Director of Mentor Digital. I'm really involved up front with our sort of major web builds, really involved with the stakeholder engagement sessions, planning, scoping, functionality, defining functionality, and then user interface design and user experience testing as well. So we've gained some experience over the last few years. I've personally led 5 going on 6 major NHS projects. In particular, I just wanted to show these because these really are where we've kind of learned the kind of things that I'm going to talk about today, and it's through doing these projects that that we've kind of come to a sort of a tried and tested process really of leading stakeholder engagement and planning of functionality of the websites. So the Bristol Royal Hospital for Children, Sarah mentioned before, is within the University Hospitals Bristol NHS Foundation Trust website. So a really nice fun one. Nottingham University Hospitals, one of the North's largest trusts. Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership Trust. Language has to be clear and clear at communicating, but there's some medical terms that does have a dictionary in it, Sarah, for terms that people roll over, for medical terms. So I thought I'd get that one in there. As well as University Hospitals Bristol Trust, which, as Sarah mentioned, we worked with her on a few years ago. Musgrove Park is the latest one that we've done, and we're now sort of working with CCGs as well on some other web builds. We get a lot of people come to us when we start these projects, and they say, yeah, we've been doing internal engagement consultancy. We've done 6 months of meetings, and we've got this huge bible of personas and research and things that we've done, and we kind of look at it and think, can we build a website from this, and could we go away today and build a website from it? Really try to avoid those lengthy digital consultancy processes in favour of a concise, well-planned set of stakeholder engagement sessions. I'm going to give you our secret really today of how we lead these. It's a tried and tested process of bringing people together, get as many senior people in your organisations involved at the beginning as possible, because we've had experience where executive management teams have sort of, oh no, we don't need to get involved with this website workshop, and then they've actually derailed it after the website's been completely built and virtually delivered, and they've gone, oh no, this is not working. So to really get those senior teams involved is really important, if possible, and try and get as many of those people who could derail things later on involved at the first phase. It's a really good way of making sure that everybody has had their say, and actually a lot of organisations are quite surprised by when they think there's going to be fighting over the homepage and everyone's going to be bidding for the top spot on the navigation, and often people are quite surprised by how the teams really come together and towards that common goal and agree what the sort of priorities are. And so from these stakeholder engagement sessions, we try to identify initially the objectives for the website. So it's sometimes a good way to start the session, go around and get everybody to sort of define their objectives for what they really want. What's the success of the website? For example, is it to increase the number of graduates applying to join your organisation? Would you like to reduce support calls? Those kind of top-level objectives, really important just to define them clearly what they are, because it really sets that the rest of the session. You can think about things in terms of those objectives for the website. Really useful session, and sometimes, again, good to get people to go into breakout groups, or it's a smaller team, everybody kind of just shout out, and we document it on the screen as people are shouting these things out. We get the groups perhaps to come and present back, and we define on the screen live who is coming to the website, why they're coming to the website, and what functionality we need to deliver to meet their requirements, and the reasons they're coming to the site. It really helps you to think in terms of putting yourselves in the shoes of your users, and trying to sort of step back away from what you want from your site and think about why are people actually coming to the site. It's also really useful to kind of prioritize these users if possible, and define priority users as well. So this one way of doing it in columns, or sometimes just a sort of Word document with bullet points, with nested bullet points of why people are coming, who's coming to the site and why they're coming to the site. And then moving on to homepage priorities. So at this point, we've kind of, the groups all agreed who we're trying to appeal to, and who we're trying to meet the requirements of. So based on that, based on the key objectives and the users, hopefully as a group we can agree what the main homepage priorities should be. And we'll talk about user interface design a little bit later on, but it's really useful to have a bullet point list in this initial scoping session and planning session that defines, right, we have to have a feedback form link, we have to have a link off to PALS, or we have to have a link off to our careers section, and it's really great to get everybody to sort of fight it out, it's not the right word, but to agree what the priorities are for the homepage. And it's a really good way of getting everybody to think about things in terms of those key objectives, the users, the user journeys through the site, and think about why people come to the site and what journey they're going to take through that homepage. Where do you want to lead them to? And ultimately, what's the goal of them being there? Is it to find information? Is it to sign a feedback form, etc.? So trying to think in terms of customer journey and key objectives or conversions in an e-commerce environment. A user would convert into a paying customer. That's called a conversion. And can be used as a sort of KPI to show your return on investment for sort of advertising, pay-per-click and things like that. So navigation items, we use just a really simple Word document with 3 rows. We talk about the primary navigation, which is your main lowest common denominator website visitors, really. These are your kind of main navigation items, the primary navigation. And it's really good to get everybody involved, and it doesn't have to be set in stone during the first meeting, because it will go around houses a bit and come back and it might change, the language might change, but it's really, really good. And it often, it's usually people really agree on what these things should be. Generally, as a rule, don't have more than 6 or 7. It's a rule of user experience. People's short-term memory, they can't absorb more than 7 items. We try to aim for 6. After the 7th item, they've forgotten the first. It's sort of somewhere between 5 and 9 that people can remember, but sort of as a rule, try not to have more than 6 or 7 items, because it means people don't feel confused or overloaded. If people say a page is busy, it's because there's too many elements to remember what the first one was when you're looking at the 9th or 10th element. So defining the navigation items. It might all seem really, really simple, but it's really concise. And if you've got time, also getting people's input during the initial workshops on design briefing as well, buzzwords. It's a really useful thing to have in your initial briefing document. So from this one-day session, or even a half-day session, you can come back with a document that has who's coming to your site, why they're coming to the site, what the functionality you need is, what your navigation items are, what your homepage priorities are, what your calls to action are, and an understanding of your user journeys, and some design briefing as well, which is a very, very useful starting point. And actually, you could actually begin to build a website from that, whereas these sort of huge piles of documents over months and months of internal meetings, often you can't. So it's a really concise, tried and tested process that works really, really well from our experience. So moving on from that, and that's something you can do yourselves internally. It's something that I'd recommend you get somebody who's quite sort of able to lead the group with some strength. Sometimes it's useful to bring in an external consultant who can kind of distance themselves from the internal politics and come in with no preconceived ideas about the organisation. But it is a session that you can lead yourselves as well, internally. And you could do that before going to brief an agency, and that document would make a really good starting point for your brief. if you're going to write a brief for an agency, and it means that the responses to your request for proposal will be hopefully a lot more suited to your requirements, and you'll be able to sort of judge them on equal merit more because you've defined really what the key functionality is that you want. So user interface and user experience are two phrases that are often interchangeable and sometimes misused. So what's the difference between UI and UX? I just love this little sketch I saw on Twitter. There's your user interface, and that's the experience over there. So I just thought that really sums it up. The experience is obviously the user's experience of using your user interface. So user interface design, wireframing. I mentioned the rule of sevens. It's when you see a site that feels busy, it's because there's too many elements competing for your attention. And elements can be bunched into a box. And though there are multiple elements in that box, when you glance at the page and when you navigate your eye around the page, your eye sees one element, two elements, three elements, and if you want to, your eye can go into that box and then see those elements separately and digest them separately. So when you glance around the page, you can very quickly digest what's there and identify where you want to go next. So that's a really useful thing to remember, is that rule of sevens and the short-term memory that people have, and think in those terms when you're designing your user interfaces. It works for navigation, it works for blocks on a page, and it is the difference between busy websites and clear, intuitive, easy to navigate websites. Wireframing's the phase, for those of you who don't know, before you get bogged down in colour, which is very subjective. You'll have half of the room want one design, one colour, and half of the room will want something different because it's so subjective. Whereas with the user interface design, wireframing, it's very logical actually, because you're trying to achieve those objectives of your site, trying to lead those users through to the ultimately the conversions that you want them to do, or to the content and the areas, the landing pages of your site that you want them to visit. So it's a logical process, and that's why that we do them black and white and grey, so that people don't get bogged down in colour. And that's so it's a good way to logically organise things before getting into the discussions about design, which I'm not going to talk about today because we haven't got much time. So we talked about user journeys. Your user is generally going from A to B, perhaps via C. There's ways that you can improve the user journey, and modern interface techniques allow you to improve the journey. Things like speed of loading, number of clicks to get to content, number of steps in the process, making things intuitive, reducing the amount of scrolling. They're just a few ways that you can improve the user journey. And user experience testing. It's not just a random picture of a gorilla there. It's a software called Silverback. It's very affordable. It's less than £100, and it works really, really well because it uses your webcam, and it tracks the user's mouse as they try and navigate your prototypes or your wireframes. And it videos their face as well as they try and navigate your site. So user experience testing is the way that we prove that our user interfaces that we've designed meet those objectives. If your users are missing the big book now button, or we generally ask them a questionnaire and say, so based on these prototypes, how would you now go and find this information, or how would you book an event, or how would you contact us? And you watch them and you watch their mouse as they navigate the prototype, and it generally really it's usually minor tweaks. Sometimes you need to reposition some things to make it a bit clearer, but it's a really good way to validate what we all think is a great wireframe and a great user interface. This really validates it from an end user's point of view, and you can actually get a good cross section of your service users, or your staff, or internal team members to sort of test. And it's a really, really good way to validate your thinking in terms of user interface. I think we've already talked about the mobile usage in the retail. Multi-platform usage is massively growing, and just in last year it jumped from July to December, jumped from 53 to 57% people using all three devices to access retail websites. So obviously everything you do really, in most cases, should have a mobile a responsive, if not a custom mobile site, and there's lots of discussions can be had on responsive versus mobile. Generally, the sort of default position is it should respond to the device. In the bowling companies we work for, all they want people to do is book bowling or find their nearest centre. So we've got a specific mobile site for them because people aren't interested in Thursday special offers or anything. They really just want to book bowling right now. So we have separate mobile websites for them. So it's responsive design is generally the default position, but there are cases when specific mobile-only kind of versions of the website are relevant. So choosing a CMS system is a big part of what you'll do, the process you'll go through when you commission a website. These are the big proprietary systems, and you may have heard of some of them. Ulterion is being phased out, it's been bought out by another company. These CMS systems will all give you a good experience, but because they're proprietary, there's many limitations, and you will end up paying tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds for these systems on an ongoing basis, especially for sort of larger NHS kind of style trusts. They can get very, very expensive. So they're good at what they do, but there can be cost implications, and we're great advocates of open source software. And open source is a big buzzword, and there are many reasons that open source is becoming the go-to option. The first one is security. If you have a proprietary system, the source code is closed down, so nobody can see that there's a bug in the... someone's hoovering, it's all right. Nobody can see if there are bugs in the code except the developers on site at the company who've developed the code. Whereas if you've got an open source product, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of developers all with eyes on the code, and they're all going to spot those security issues much quicker than if it's a proprietary software house who only have a small team rather than the thousands of people who are using software. Quality of code. Again, if you've got thousands of different people using it, the quality of the code is going to be better because it's going to be designed for many more applications and for different people's uses. Customizability. You try getting the source code out of one of these proprietary software systems and adding something you need yourself. You can't, and you end up paying a lot of money to try and customize things with those companies. So customizability is brilliant with open source. You've got the source code, your developers can take the source code and they can run with it. Freedom. You've got the freedom to move the code around into your own development teams and do what you want with it as well. Interoperability means that with those thousands of people that are developing these softwares, they all have different requirements of interfacing with different systems. So you'll find that open source software has much more interoperability with many more platforms than your proprietary systems, which will only interface with the systems they want you to buy. Auditability. You can see the code is compliant. You can see there's no bugs, whereas proprietary software, you just have to take their word for it. Support. The support is going to be better on open source products because the people providing the source and open source products are developers that make a business of supporting those open source products, and that's their product that they sell is the support. So whereas the people who are offering support from proprietary software, their business is developing software, and the support is a sideline. So better support, and of course cost is the main one because open source is completely free. So open source systems, some names that most of you have heard of: Drupal, WordPress, Joomla, and Umbraco. We were in a pitch for a large NHS trust website a few weeks ago, and one of the directors piped up. He said, "So why aren't you recommending WordPress? I read here 80% of the sites on the web are powered by WordPress." So I said, "Yeah, that's true. But 80% of the websites on the web are blogs." And WordPress is a blogging software, effectively. Very, very good at blogging. Very good if you wanted maybe a page or two without any interesting functionality or anything interactive. It's fine for that. Drupal, some people do use it to try and build large enterprise-level sites. Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress are PHP-based systems. Joomla and Drupal are quite similar. And there are people who leverage it for larger sites. But out of the box, Umbraco is the one that we back, mainly because it plays alongside, in a similar field to all the other big proprietary ones that gives you role-based access, publishing, preview rights, and out of the box it gives you much, much better functionality than the others. So Umbraco is the one that we really like. Yeah, so our team at Mentor, we've developed lots of free open source software that we give back. It's all completely free. Mentor Web Blocks is the key one, and that allows you to sort of have drag and drop editing within the CMS, which is only actually available on the more expensive CMSs. We define all the building blocks. We set up all the ingredient bowls on the edge of the table, and then you can make your recipe and do your cooking. We get great feedback from our clients on how easy it is to use the content management system. So that's just a quick overview, really. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Please do tweet us, #harnessing the power. Thank you all so much for coming. It's great.